Hey, and welcome to the show. My name is Sir Cheesehead.
I'm Formal Bad.
And we're going to be talking about cutscenes today. This is our new show, and currently it is still untitled. But we're basically just going to be talking about our personal opinions here and defending them to the death. I think we're basically going to be discussing a whole range of things, not just the usual cutscenes that you see within the game, but also stuff like cinematics, scripted events, times when in games you lose control of your character. But we're not really going to be talking that much about I still like to make I like to differentiate it from dialogue menus within RPGs. So let's get started with this. First, what are the most memorable cutscenes that you can basically remember from the recent years?
You mean like recent games, or?
Yeah, let's say like from, I don't know, 2003, 2004 to the present.
I think, well, the first thing that pops into my mind is definitely the opening cutscene in BioShock. Or not the opening cutscene, but the cutscene where you enter Rapture.
Yeah.
For the first time. Because I feel like it kind of, it really encapsulates the atmosphere of the place. And it fits in with like the context of the game, because you're getting into a bathysphere and just going down into the ocean, so that it doesn't make sense that they would like move around or do some stupid shit. Another one actually was, it's not 2003, 2004, but Deus Ex. The opening, the opening cutscene on that was also really good. I feel like, again, it set up like the universe and like what's gonna happen and thing and so on. I'm thinking, what else? I like the cutscenes in like the original GTA 3 trilogy. The GTA 3 Vice City San Andreas.
Yeah, alright. I haven't really played that, so I wouldn't know.
Well, the cutscenes, like those games are pretty silly, and the cutscenes kind of reflect that with the crazy characters and stuff. Mm-hmm. Again, they fit the atmosphere. Yeah. Though GTA 4 is kind of a different.
Well, yeah, I've heard GTA. I've only played the first GTA and then GTA 2, and then I just skipped everything in the middle and went straight to 4.
Yeah.
So I heard it was a lot sillier, like more like Saints Row or something.
Yeah, it's kind of proto Saints Row, I guess.
Yeah.
Saints Row is kind of a parody of games anyway.
Yeah.
Actually, another game that had pretty not good cutscenes, but like in terms of quality, but at least interesting ones, was Deadly Premonition, which basically it's Twin Peaks the game. And I mean, the gameplay was pretty much terrible. I mean, it was pretty much like a budget game and that exceeded its scope, but the cutscenes, they were just so weird and had just such weird characters and stuff that it was fun to watch. Not that fun to play though. I don't know if this actually fits within the concept of like the cutscene we were talking about, but the Max Payne comics scenes.
Yeah,
like the second and
I think
game.
they still kind of.
But still, you don't have really control over them.
Yeah, and it's sort of like it's pushing the story forward.
Yeah.
Like in gameplay, like in Max Payne, like during the gameplay, the story kind of, also changes there, but it's more like just, action, shooting, running.
Yeah.
So like those places like really push the story forward and like set up like the next level, whatever it was, their mission.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like, I like the style of it. It kind of had this campy feel to it, so it was still, it didn't take itself too seriously. Kind of like with Max Payne 3, and that's like cutscene central right there.
That was pretty memorable.
Oh god. And you couldn't even skip them.
Unskippable cutscenes.
That's great. If you go even further back though, Command and Conquer cutscenes. Like the first and Red Alert. And Red Alert 1 or Red Alert 2 came out in like 2001 or 2000 or something like that.
Red Alert 2 came out, like 2001 or something like that.
I like those cutscenes. Because they're
those were just ridiculous.
And it's also like, how are you going to tell a story in an RTS game? Like back then, when it was just still isometric and stuff.
Yeah.
a bunch of pixels on the screen don't really convey that much emotion.
No, and you can only get so much through just like, voice files.
Yeah. They had like that little window in the top of the screen, the minimap, where it's something, little face that would talk to you.
Yeah. I really like those cutscenes because they just didn't take themselves seriously at all. They knew they were just so silly and out there, and
I think like one of the reasons why it worked so well was actually the actors. They kind of did take it seriously, but the script and stuff was so terrible, and they were so terrible at acting that it just like came together in such a bad way that it was good. That's kind of, I think, what was missing in Red Alert 3. Well, the cutscenes, like, they got a bunch of like good actors there, like Peter Stormare and like all kinds of, known people. Yeah. And then they just told them to ham it up, So when you watch those cutscenes, you could tell that they were just, it was deliberate. They were kind of forcing it, and it didn't just feel like that Red Alert dumbness.
But if we're coming like further into the present, like further towards the present, I mean, obviously there have been like recently a lot of games that have had a lot of like cutscenes and scripted events. I mean, if we're talking just like BioWare role-playing games, the Dragon Age and Mass Effect series.
Yeah.
And then if we're talking about stuff like, modern military shooters, like in the single players, I mean, that's...
They have a lot of cutscenes in those, or not cutscenes, but scripted events.
Yeah. This also doesn't precisely fit in with this, but it kind of does. It's like in some of those modern military shooters, sometimes you have like options to like knock down a door, like kick down the door.
Yeah.
And for that split moment, it takes control of the character away from you to give you like this really smooth, like, I just kicked the door. Like, that's kind of like, it feels a bit irritating at times.
I hate those things the most. It's just, because they keep the first person in perspective, but they just take away all controls. They're just sitting there watching like, oh, we don't trust you to do this, you just have to watch us. We can program in like a kick button or like a prompt on the door. It would just be kick door. It's just like, oh no, we can't trust you with this. Yeah. You won't figure it out.
Or with some games where it's like, let's say you're walking down a hallway, and then like the building like trembles or something, and then in some games, I think you like maintain control throughout all that. Like you just keep running down the hallway, like the building's trembling, whatever. Yeah. But in others, it's like you lose control and you see your character like in third person, like, oh, swaying to one side, oh, swaying to the other. It's like, it's just that it takes that control away for that split second and then gives it right back to you. Like, was that necessary?
Yeah, what's the point? Like, oh, we need to show you kind of like jiggling around a bit. So you understand that the building is shaking. Otherwise you wouldn't get it, would you?
Yeah. But of course, I'm guessing we're already like traversing in the area of annoying cutscenes.
Yeah.
So I think we can basically just what are some of the most annoying things you can remember, like off the top of your head, about cutscenes?
Well, as we mentioned before, Max Payne 3, where the fact wasn't that the cutscenes themselves were like badly made or like well, let's leave the story aside. Like, I don't really like the story in Max Payne 3. But the fact that there were so many cutscenes that it got to the point where every door you walk through was another cutscene. Where Max switched to his pistol and took like the rifle in his hand, the other hand. I was just walking around and moping. It just felt like they were really gating you or something, or it felt heavy-handed. Like they couldn't figure out any other way to tell the story. Like they just had to always push you in some direction.
Yeah, I feel that with some games, they have a specific idea of how they want to tell a story, and often it's kind of like telling a story in a movie sense that you're just watching it unfold.
Yeah, that's actually a thing with a lot of Rockstar games, that they pretty much adapt movies to games. Like Max Payne 3, for example, is pretty much Man on Fire, the movie with Denzel Washington, and you know, GTA 3 was pretty much like Goodfellas and all kinds of movies, like mafia movies. And the fact is, like, when you start like to adapt those movie ideas into like a game context, you're pretty much gonna end up with a lot of cutscenes anyway, because, you know, you're probably writing the script like you're writing a movie.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the main argument always is that games are supposed to be interactive.
Sure, I guess, but
now that's not always like the most important thing. I mean, a cutscene can be a good thing, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, if done right. But I feel that I don't know if it's the director of the game, if it's the writer, I don't know, but it's like they don't trust the player. It's like we don't trust the people enough to give them an interactive gameplay way to get this part of the story. We have to put them in a scripted event or a cutscene so we know that, you know, this and this will happen.
And I think it's also that the way they write the scripts again is like they write movies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's very narrow focus, which is maybe not the best choice for a game like that. But yeah, it also gets into like budget problems in the sense like you can't really make like a game that has like, oh, you can do anything and whatever, and also have it have like every character voiced, and you know.
Well, of course, there are very linear games out there that have story and that have virtually no cutscenes.
Well,
Half-Life,
and Half-Life 2. Though Half-Life 1, it still had that one scene, like, you remember the part where you got knocked out by the merc guys? I thought that was so stupid, because there you were, you had, like, killed a fucking 1,000 of those guys by that point. And then all of a sudden that one dude knocks you out and drags you away. It's like...
it's like, wasn't it like in a dark room that the lights went out? Didn't you have a flashlight?
Yeah.
But it's not just that. It's like, okay, that was like one part of the scene. The other was, they wanted to throw you in a trash compactor, not just put a bullet in your head.
That's,
You did not have a helmet on.
A bit contrived. But,
well,
that game was also like, it's old. We can't really judge it by today's standards. Half-Life 1, I actually don't remember, it didn't have cutscenes in the middle of the game.
I don't remember.
It had parts, well, it had a lot of scripted moments where you could move around the camera around, but you couldn't really like do anything.
And there were, of course, like scripted things that happen around you, but you could still move. I mean, wasn't it the time, like, you know, like the tentacle thing, you know, grabs the scientist?
Yeah.
I mean, that always happens. You can't prevent that from happening. You always see stuff like that happen, but you didn't have to look at that.
Yeah. But I like that.
I mean, you had the power to just turn right back around and not look at anything that happened there.
Just jump around and hit the wall with your crowbar or something.
Yeah.
But it's like Valve really does understand the fact that it's not even about choice, but it's the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Like if you...
The feeling of freedom.
Yeah, if you take control away from the camera, like you no longer can move around or even look around, it just feels like you're not playing. It just takes you out of the moment. But even if you like retain like the little bit of camera movement, like in Half-Life 2 when you went into the Citadel, you remember like the ride, you couldn't really do much there, just look around, but it still worked. Like you still
could look around and you could zoom in.
Yeah, and it made sense in the context because you were confined in this thing, like
Of course, then we come to cutscenes. That it's not just that they take control away from you, but that they just don't make any sense.
Yeah,
and the character acts in a way that you would not act.
Yeah, the rules change.
Yeah.
And the first thing that comes to mind with that is Uncharted 2. There was a level on a train where you pretty much had to fight all the way to the front of the train.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to a boss fight. You beat the boss by like pumping full of, I don't know how many bullets, like 200 bullets or something like that. Switches to a cutscene. You get shot with one bullet in the gut, and you just straight go down. Like it's like immediately like, oh, I'm gonna die now. But then the cutscene plays out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you wake up. The train is dangling over a cliff. It's like freezing cold, and then it switches back to gameplay, and you proceed to climb up the train with the bullet wound.
Yeah.
Climb up the train in freezing weather, and then just commence to like kill a bunch of dudes, and the animations and stuff don't change. So it's just like, wait, you just got shot, and you were like, oh, I'm gonna die, and now you're like, oh, I'm gonna climb this fucking train with a bullet wound in my gut after sitting in freezing weather for like, I don't know how long, being passed out in a fucking crashed train. Didn't they think about this like for 1 second? Maybe
it looks cool. It looks cool.
I guess it does, but it doesn't feel real at all. Like that moment annoyed the hell out of me. I got pissed.
Now, some of the things that pop into my mind, like two things that quite annoyed me, they actually come from one of my favorite games, the Mass Effect series. One is in Mass Effect 1, and this was like my first playthrough of Mass Effect 1. And there's this place on, was it Pharos? It's the one with the thorium.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get these gas grenades that you can use to knock out the brain-controlled civilians to save them. Or you can just hit them with your weapon. And I did this 3 times. I just reloaded my save, and 3 times I did this because I tried to save that one guy in the end, the leader, who basically just shoots himself in the head.
Yeah.
Because I had grenades at that point. I was like, why do I not have an option to just throw a grenade there? Or even if he tries to shoot me, I have shields.
Yeah.
I mean, let him shoot me. I mean, why don't I just yell, shoot me, I have shields, you won't hurt me.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the Mass Effect games have really strong gameplay and story segregation, I feel.
Yeah.
It's kind of prevalent, the cutscenes.
But, like, I'm actually willing to forgive that because I didn't really care about that character at all.
Yeah, sure.
But Mass Effect 3... Now, I have quite a few issues with Mass Effect 3, but sticking to, like, cutscenes... Kai Leng.
Yeah.
Kai Leng...
Best character of 2012.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Because he apparently has the magic ability to stop my characters from thinking logically. The scene where he fights Thane.
Yeah.
I just stand there. My party just... I had Liara, who has, like, biotics.
Yeah.
You know, she could, like, grab the guy.
Or just push him away or something, at least.
Yeah. And I have Shepard, you know, who's, like, a badass vanguard. Okay? I mean... I had Garrus also. Could shoot the guy, you know, a bullet. And we did nothing. We just stood there.
They're like, oh fuck, a cutscene, let's just watch. Even the characters in the game are like, oh, it's time to watch a cutscene.
Because that just makes no sense. There are so many cutscenes where, you know, Shepard, you know, Thane is my friend, we're good buddies, you know, all that. And what the fuck was that?
You can handle that thing, even though you have space cancer.
Yeah, that really frustrated me.
Well, Kai Leng in general, he's a cutscene badass. But in the game, he's a huge wuss, like the fight on the...
Thessia?
You could, like, take his shield stand with a couple of shots, but then it goes into a cutscene and suddenly it's like, oh no, he's too strong for us with his katana.
That can cut through the engine of a car, apparently.
Yeah. Magic katana in the future. Just shoot the guy.
That kind of annoyed the hell out of me.
Kai Leng he's annoying and he's also like a terrible villain.
So I think we can both agree that it's just there are games where just the cutscenes, they make no sense within the universe of the game.
Yeah, like Deus Ex Human Revolution, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, you could play that game however you want, right? But the cutscenes are always the same.
Yeah.
So like when you get to the Barrett fight, for example,
Yeah.
the first fight in the game, you've been sneaking the entire time.
Non-lethal weapons.
Yeah, you haven't actually, maybe you haven't even killed anybody at all. You haven't even shot anybody, just pure sneaking. And then the cutscene plays and you're just walking into the middle of the room like, oh, what's going on? Huh? Like, god damn it, Jensen, what are you doing?
How do you not notice that guy? He's a truck.
Yeah, he's the size of a building. He's like a bulldozer, basically, without the tank treads.
I actually saw this on YouTube. I think it was on YouTube. I saw like a video of that. One guy took him down using, non-lethal methods.
And then he died.
It was still the same cutscene, like completely covered in blood and.
There was actually a thing in the third boss fight with Mimir in like the Hall of Mirrors, or not mirrors, it was just with the statues and stuff.
Oh, you could do a takedown.
You could do a takedown when he's climbing over the wall. It could just be the regular non-lethal takedown where you punch him in the face and then he cues the cutscene, he's all bloodied up like, oh, like damn guy, you really can't take a punch. Like,
Yeah.
In general, the cutscenes in Deus Ex Human Revolution were kind of bad. Like, I love that game, but the cutscenes were just stupid, and they were in weird places. Like the first time you entered the limb clinic, the cutscene plays, and you're like, okay.
I don't even remember most of those anymore.
It's not like that area was huge. It was just like a couple of rooms, and it's just still like, oh, intro. We need to see Jensen walking into this room to establish
with his fancy coat.
We need to establish that he's in the room. Like, what? I get that. Yeah.
Now, there are also, of course, some more subtle, inconsistencies with gameplay and cutscenes. But in some cases, it's like you're really willing to forgive that. Like GTA 4. There's a big difference between the Nico that you can play and the Nico in the cutscenes.
Which actually the Nico you choose to play and the Nico in the cutscenes. You can play like the Nico in the cutscenes.
Yeah, you can.
You can be like the normal dude, but that's not fun. You want to just immediately, when you walk out of a building, steal the first car you see and like run over like a police officer and then just shoot a person from the window and
you get into a massive chase scene.
Yeah, and then drive a car off a bridge and something like that. But actually, in GTA 4, the way the cutscenes were implemented, I didn't mind that. Yeah. The fact is, you weren't forced into them. You could just do cutscenes whenever, which was the case also in like the previous games. But the fact that the cutscene Nico was so, he was so one note basically. He was, I want to be a good guy now, but I have to do bad things. Oh no! That's basically his character. Actually, one thing that's weird about cutscenes, which is the fact that the difference in quality sometimes, with a bit of like earlier games when you didn't have like in-game cutscenes all the time. Well, that's actually like, the case still in some games these days. You know, the graphics of the game are one thing, but then you get like the cutscene, which is pretty obviously a video.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much, as soon as it starts, you can tell by the video compression, like in Deus Ex Human Revolution, you're like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can see the pixels.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's also kind of a problem. Max Payne 3 actually tried to get rid of that by having like really uncompressed video, but that game was also like 30 gigabytes, which is a bit much.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yep. But Max Payne 3 doesn't have as much cutscenes as like Metal Gear Solid 4, for example, which has like 9 hours of cutscenes or something like that. Actually, one thing I want to bring up is like the loss of control thing. Mm-hmm. In Far Cry 3, to me it was just so jarring the way they used that stuff in that game. Because like most of the game is like super free, you can go wherever you want to go and do whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. But when you like enter like a cutscene, it's all first person. Yeah. And when you enter the cutscene, it's all in game. But it has this thing where like, in at least the PC version, you can set the FOV to like something else, like 90 or something.
Yeah.
But when you go into the cutscene, it reverts back immediately. So it's like, bleh, oh, it's time for cutscenes. Like,
what happened to my eyes?
Cutscene.
Someone put the blinders on.
My eyes are a movie camera.
Like blinds on a horse.
Yeah, which is kind of weird in like games when the cutscenes are in first person, when you still have like the lens flare and stuff. The things like, are my eyes cameras or something? What's going on? Why do I have dust on my eyes? What are you doing? I think like in general, like cutscenes that are just cutscenes, you know, they cut away. They don't bother me as much as the stuff that is like loss of control, like in Call of Duty and Crysis and all those games.
Yeah.
Because that stuff is super obvious. It's like you immediately know something important's gonna happen. Like, better not miss this. Gonna go to the kitchen, make a sandwich while this melodrama is playing out. I don't know. How do you feel about those like loss of control parts versus those just regular ass cutscenes? Let's assume you can skip those.
Assuming you can skip cutscenes.
Yeah.
Just on that note, I believe that every game that has cutscenes should have like, I can't remember which game this was. I played it just recently. It's basically that you have this like, you have to hold down a button like escape for like 2 seconds if you want to skip the cutscene. I have, unfortunately, unintentionally, I have skipped like some dialogue options in games or some cutscenes by accidentally hitting a button. I don't want that to happen, but I want the option to skip. I would just really like it if like every game would be like you hold down escape for like 2 seconds and then that forces the cutscene to end.
Or press it twice. Something like that.
Yeah, like tap it. I don't know.
Once to pause and twice to skip.
Yeah, it would be like you wouldn't run the risk of like just any button would just like cut it.
Yeah.
But also that you could just please, if you're replaying a game, or if you have to reload a save, I don't want to go through that again, mate.
Yeah, watch that stuff again. So.
I mean, some of those things are really fucking long.
Yeah, fucking Metal Gear Solid 4. Long.
But yeah, losing control is one of the most annoying things. A lot more than a cutscene.
Yeah.
Or like if you get like, I don't know, like some cinematics or something. Yeah, let's just call it cutscenes. Like if you get a cutscene that's like, you know, it's well done. It has a purpose. It serves a purpose. But losing control is really jarring because you can get immersed in a game. You're like in it. You're like really like in the groove or whatever you want to call it. And then you lose the capability. You lose the ability to do anything. It breaks immersion.
Yeah, it's also like when it goes to a third-person cutscene.
Yeah.
The developers have more options to move the camera around and give you like establishing shots and all kinds of like different, you know, using movie logic, you can do all kinds of things. But if it's still in first person, then the only thing it does is just turn your head for you and make you look at some stuff. Or just maybe it's like one moment where the developers didn't want to like script in like the stuff, like program in an option to do something like that in game. They just want to have like a big moment or something.
It does come down to this, like you talked about Valve and the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Like if we take, for instance, Portal 2, like the ending. I think we can. I mean, Portal 2's been out for a while. Everyone's played it. In the end, where you have to launch like the portal onto the moon.
You still have control in that part. You
yes,
can aim
yes.
Wherever.
But basically, that's the only real path that you could take. I mean, you can do nothing. You can do nothing. But basically, if you want to continue, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But still, it's you doing it. It's not that the computer then takes control, the game then takes control and moves your hand and gun for you because you're too stupid to do it on your own. But again, there's really nothing else you could do.
Yeah.
But it's so much more satisfying if you do it.
Yeah, it's just the feeling of the click, like, I launched that portal on the moon, god damn it.
You click that button.
Hell yeah. Yeah, but I think the scene where you shoot the moon, I'm not sure, I haven't listened to the developer commentary recently, but I think it was something like, it just came out of testing, like, the players wondered if they could shoot the moon. I don't know if it was like, actually, if the previous versions had it like pointed at the moon, like it is in the final version, where it's just the only choice, or it was just like you could shoot it at the moon, but you have to figure it out yourself. Which is I still feel like it's constricting in a way. But really, like, if you think about it, what else would you do in that scene? Like, Portal 2 isn't a game about choice, it's a game about puzzles.
Yeah. And in Portal 2, most of the puzzles only have one solution. I think in Portal 1, you could basically, like, cheat a bit and, like, get more than one solution to some puzzles.
Well, if you're a speedrun guy, you can probably figure out how to, like, clip through the walls and just jump over the level or something like that.
Oh. But if we talk about cutscenes, like that really do push the story forward, such as, well, I think, well, to me, was one of the most iconic from my history of playing games. It's in Warcraft 3, when Arthas returns from Northrend and kills his father. I mean, that's basically just like a movie scene, you know?
But it plays out in the RTS perspective still, doesn't it?
No, it's a cinematic.
Oh, it's a cinematic. I thought some of the cutscenes in Warcraft 3 were like...
Yeah, they were so cartoony and cute. I actually liked them. Yeah, but no, this is like one of the Blizzard cinematics. You know, that's a Blizzard cinematic.
Yeah, but those are really high quality too, so they're fun to watch.
And that's basically like a part of the story that I just loved watching that over and over again. I just, like, at the time, I just really loved it. I still like it. But that's no gameplay whatsoever. That's just watching a movie. And you also get this in-game where basically, like, the gameplay stops. You basically get a bit of a movie. But if it's good, if you're playing the game, like, for the story, it's like one of those games where the story matters to you, and you know, you see the story move forward, stuff happens, it's well produced, it's well done, then it's not like it's a bad thing.
Well, I think it's also the fact that the cutscene, like the cinematic quality, is way beyond anything in the game. So it just lends a lot of extra weight to what's happening on the screen. Because RTS games in general are very difficult to, like, you can't really tell a story in the RTS perspective that well.
Yeah.
Like, even take, like, StarCraft 2. Like, you imagine if all that story was told in basically, like, tiny little men talking to each other all the time.
Well, you have the little portraits that talk.
Though, actually, some games do have, like, the tiny little portraits talking to each other, like the old isometric RPGs, like Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 and that stuff. And it actually works in those games for some reason. Like, you don't really feel...
You're not expecting it to, like, just drop into, like, some close-up scene. Like, with these high-fidelity character models and stuff like that.
Zoom in, enhance. See, that's kind of weird, actually. That those games don't really have... They have cutscenes, but they're usually in the middle and have very important story points, but in, like, dialogue scenes and stuff. I think it's just the fact that more thought is put into the writing. And it just works because of that. It's actually a good example of how you can tell a story without having to resort to cutscenes. Or even voice acting. So yeah, these days it's kind of like voice acting and cutscenes and, you know, cinematic scenes are so par for the course that people don't even think about, like, any other options.
Well, yeah, but it's also that many players don't want those other options. They're really comfortable with, you know, voice acting and, like, those movie-type scenes.
Yeah. Well, actually, of course, it's like the graphics are getting so much better. Like, if you take a game, for example, like Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Yeah.
The voice acting in that game is like a couple of actors, right?
Yeah.
But would it actually be better without any voice actors?
I'm not sure, actually. I might say that it actually might be a bit better.
Because I think it's better with the voices. Even if there are a couple of voices, it's the first person perspective, right?
Yeah.
And you're staring those people in the face.
Mm-hmm.
See, if it's just like text, like something like Dragon Age Origins, where the main character didn't talk. Actually, that didn't bother me that much, but it was sometimes kind of weird compared to like everybody else is like yapping about and so on, and then you're just like mute face, no expression.
Yeah, the expression, like the lack of expression, that's the main thing that got to me.
You look like
I mean, maybe if it had been in first-person perspective in Dragon Age, but I couldn't see my face when I said those things.
Well, those games are pretty cinematic, actually, like Dragon Age Origins and so on, like the Mass Effect series and stuff.
Yeah, BioWare is really going that way.
Yeah, and I would say it's not treating them the best, to be honest. Like the huge whole like big moment cutscene thing, and at the same time, oh, we're gonna cater to player choice or something, just doesn't mesh at some point. And Mass Effect 3 is a good example of that.
I mean, they're nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you could basically make a very big RPG that has like, oh, so many multiple choices and like different races you can play and all that, and you can, like, for all those options, you can make all these scenes, like these, there were stuff like different dialogue, voice acted scenes, and the different camera angles and all that. I mean, I would like that. But you're not going to be able to make something like that, not yet anyway.
Yeah, I think like before we actually get like a huge amount of choice in games, we have to figure out like voice synthesis or something that sounds natural. Because getting voice actors to voice act like 1 billion lines of dialogue plus like the storage capacity, where are you going to keep all that voice stuff and animation files and things?
Yeah,
it gets a bit unruly.
But what cutscenes or cinematics or anything like that, what do you think are the most, some of the best, like that you think like really justify leading cutscenes into games?
Well, once again, it's like I mentioned before, BioShock, for example, like the cutscenes that are introductory, basically, that are there, like it's before you're playing, before you even establish like, oh, you're this character or something or other. It's like you have this cutscene to just tell you, okay, this is where you are, this is what's going on, this is this world and so on, these people are planning something and so on. Like, I like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Just gives you a little bit of background information. Like, it's not, you could tell that stuff in a different way, but mostly it works.
I agree with that. But do you think that it only maybe works for a certain type of game? That there are certain games out there that, well, maybe some sort of short little cutscene in the beginning is okay, but that they really don't need like so many, like all these cutscenes throughout the game, that it really hurts them?
Well, I think shooters, actually, like shooters that keep the first-person perspective.
Yeah. I
feel like those don't really need those cutscenes, because, or at least those moments where they take away the control, because it's just, once again, it just takes you out of the game.
Yeah,
it's just, you lose the immersion. But if you commit to the first-person perspective, you should commit to the first-person perspective in every way. Just don't start making up random rules.
Yeah.
Once it becomes convenient, like, think up some sort of confines for your game. Like, this is what we can do in gameplay, so this is how we're gonna tell the story.
Yeah.
Like, don't write a story that's so beyond the scope of what your game can do. Like, oh, and then the building explodes and the guy, like, pole vaults across an elephant or something like that.
Well, maybe if you can do that in gameplay.
Yeah,
like,
well, if it's in gameplay, that's fine, that's whatever, like, go for it. But if the cutscene is just there to show, like, oh, and now this fucking cool thing happens, but you can't interact with it in any way, so you can just watch yourself do it.
Look what we can do with our engine!
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I feel like the cutscene stuff, it gets weird when it's meant for, like, presentation, like, wow moments. You know, the big moments in games that are kind of prevalent in games like AAA games like Gears of War and so on.
Yeah,
we just need to have these big moments, like this big firefight and the big explosion and like running on the ship, and all that stuff is maybe a bit misguided. Because it's, yeah, sure, it's cool to look at, but at the end of the day, you kind of want to play that stuff. And it's even worse when it's rendered in-engine. So, you know, the engine can actually handle making this stuff, but they just didn't want to program it in. It's just like, oh, you can just have him watch him do cool stuff, and you're just sitting back there with your beer or something like.
Yeah. I pretty much agree with this, and I think, yeah, that shooters, like, let's say it's a shooter, you know, not like Half-Life, which is basically like it continues all the time. But it's more like a shooter where, like, you have one mission, I don't know, you, like, go back to base, and then you, like, go on another mission, like, the base thing, like, okay, you can put a cutscene there at the end of this mission, at the beginning of this mission. I'm okay with that, you know, it sets, like, you know, what's happening, you know, it moves the story on again a bit. I mean, shooters don't usually need that much story, but, like, yeah, within the mission itself, I think mostly it's really not necessary, and some games suffer from having those points, like losing control again, but I don't know, I mean, of course, if it's done well, Spec Ops: The Line.
Well, Spec Ops: The Line was pretty... It was decently done, maybe some parts were a bit weird. But, like, the thing I don't like about cutscenes these days is, like, they're used so much for forced exposition. Where they just, you know, they need to tell you something, but they can't figure out how to tell you within the confines of the level or something. So they just, like, okay, we're just gonna take control away from you and just dump this info, and you're like, oh, you're in the cave of Beelzebub, and he's an ancient demon born 5,000 years ago, and you feel like they're just spoon feeding you some kind of garbage.
Yeah.
It's also kind of, it goes into kind of another problem, which is it's not inherent to cutscenes, but it gets expressed through cutscenes a lot, which is overconfidence in storytelling these days.
Yeah.
That the developers and the writers of the games believe that what they're writing
is amazing.
It's so compelling that you don't even have to do anything at that moment. Like, you're perfectly happy watching this unfold in front of you.
It's almost like they're disgruntled movie writers.
Almost, huh?
It's like they didn't make it in Hollywood.
That's strange, huh? That's nothing. I'm sure that has nothing to do with this.
I mean, many people, of course, argue that stuff like cinematics and all these cutscenes and so on, that is sort of like snowballing to make... it's making games like so much more of a viewing experience and less of a gameplay experience. And I wouldn't really fault... I don't think you can actually fault cutscenes for this. It's the people who write this stuff, who direct it, who decide to put it in. You can't argue that this concept, a cutscene is a concept. You can't be mad at a concept, like if it ruins your game.
I hate computer graphics, or...
It's like there are people who decided to put this in and decided to keep it because they thought it was good enough.
Yeah. I think the problem kind of stems from the attitude that was prevalent starting from FMV games, when the thing like, oh, it's like a movie that you can play, became a selling point. And so, like, games really started to look to movies for inspiration and so on. And since it's like the closest visual medium, right? Video games, there's nothing like that, like, to base it on. Like, you know, movies have photography and theater to like base their concepts on, but games just, they have to just take ideas from movies.
And why wouldn't you take ideas from movies? Because I mean, movies, you know, it's such a big, successful business.
And they're respected.
Yes.
Movies are a respected business, which I'm afraid to say this, that video games aren't really that respected right now. Like, when you talk to like an average person about, oh, video games, they think about like, oh, Mario, and you know, you can't, what compelling story? There is no story, right? You just shoot dudes.
Yeah, I think it'll take at least another decade for games to really become like a respected business.
I don't know if it's even like a decade. Like, I think it's not about time. It's about like how people start utilizing this. Because right now we're seeing, especially this generation, the trend is that developers are railroading the players a lot more than before. That game, like level design, has become basically like a corridor. We're just running forward from cutscene to cutscene, and both of those things kind of feed into each other, because it's like, oh, we need to have like this narrow corridor so the player doesn't deviate and he gets to the cutscene. And then we need to have the cutscene so the player like can see the cool story and know where to have to go next and so on. Like, it gets so narrow in scope. At some point you feel like, you're not playing, you're watching.
Yeah, we're kind of like now digressing into the area of, linearity in games. I think we can save that for another topic.
But it's kind of
it is connected to cutscenes, definitely, and just games becoming more of a viewing experience and less of an interactive or gameplay experience.
Well, I think the crux of the thing is like the cinematic experience thing is kind of like such a big selling point, and developers are hyping it up like, oh, Hitman Absolution has like 10 hours of cutscenes and we have 50 hours of recorded voice, and they're like, but is the game any good, right?
Yeah, I think maybe it's also that it's really easy to like imagine like a cool scene for a game.
Yeah.
And like the easiest way to implement that scene is probably with some sort of cutscene.
Yeah. But actually, I think another thing is like, especially this generation, that gaming has become a lot bigger. A lot of more casual players have gone into this, and players who haven't played like earlier games, so they're used to watching movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So like they don't mind that stories delivered like a movie. But older players that are used to like gameplay first, they're the ones who are really suffering right now from this.
Yeah.
But they're also the ones who are very picky about the games they play, right? Like the casual audience just buys the big game, right? The Assassin's Creeds and the Call of Duties and stuff. Which is also like they probably don't think of a game like as some sort of story thing. They just want, the big experience. They play through it once, like, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and of course many players are basically just like, it's like casual hobby, you like if you play like on a console, you pick up the controller, you play for maybe an hour or two, that's it, done, back to studies, work, whatever, go out with your friends, don't really even think about it. It's just like to get that short experience right there to fill that gap of free time.
Now, if you give like a casual player something like Stalker, which has very little cutscenes and a very big open world to like mess around in, I think they would be pretty lost in that. It's also like feeds into the railroading thing, like linearity, which feeds into the cutscenes again, and it's like a huge mess, pretty much.
Sandboxy games, of course, can often overwhelm everyone.
Well, sandboxy games have their own problems, I think the cutscenes are not the biggest problems in sandboxy games. It's more that the gameplay itself doesn't really justify the big world usually. I feel like the cutscene thing these days is not really a problem with all games.
No.
It's the big games, I feel, that are like... The games that have budgets for cutscenes are the games that have problems. Because indie games, they can have those old school type cutscenes, like, I don't know, like Duke Nukem 2 had the intro where it was just like text and like pictures, and you just read the thing, you're like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Yeah,
but of course, again, there are companies who realize that putting a cutscene like within like this, like game A or game B, it just might not work out. They just don't bother putting it there. I mean, Blizzard, for most part, they don't really have cutscenes within like their games. I mean, basically the only games actually that, leaving World of Warcraft aside, you can't, putting cutscenes in an MMO. They do actually have those now.
Yeah, they do.
They do. Yeah, they actually do have those. Yeah, I actually forgot. Yeah, Cataclysm and Pandaria. Yeah, they have those.
The Old Republic. The biggest joke.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like in like StarCraft and Diablo, I mean, there aren't really cutscenes per se within, you know, the game. It's like, oh, like you completed chapter this, you get the cinematic. Congratulations.
Yeah. Congratulations. An achievement pops up, you're like, yeah.
Do you have anything else to add at this point?
I'm just thinking like, well, okay, one thing is that the cutscenes do show overconfidence in storytelling in some games, but I feel in some games it's just there to cover up, like, the huge production value is just there to cover up, like, the story isn't really that good. Like, you have games like Resident Evil 6 where the cutscenes look really good, a bunch of production value and, like, mocap and stuff went into it, but the story itself is kind of like, right, this is dumb. But now the problem is, like, what do you do instead?
Again, it comes down to the type of a game it is. And of course, you know, a cutscene requires a story that is capable of holding that cutscene afloat, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just slap it into anything like a completely... I mean, imagine if something like... what is that game? A Painkiller.
Yeah.
Yeah. If like you're just destroying everything around. If that just stopped for a moment, cutscene.
Oh, hold up! Time for story.
Wait, what? What's happening here? I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. What the fuck's going on? It's like I don't understand why. Maybe it is, as you say, that some people just think that, oh, the story they've come up with, you know, is just so good that they need to put it in. But it depends what the game is. Is it completely gameplay oriented? Does it have like a good enough narrative and story and characters for that fact? You need characters that you actually give a fuck about, to actually pay attention to what's going on in the cutscene.
Yeah, like The Walking Dead. That game is pretty much like cutscenes with some choices in the middle. But I love those games because it's a good story. Yes, it's just well written and it's good. It's maybe not like revolutionary. It's not like, oh, Spec Ops tried to do the whole, oh, we're flipping it upside down. It's some sort of like weird deconstruction of video games and violence and stuff, and we're gonna be all like crazy moral about it and stuff. But it's just like the story in Walking Dead, it just works. It's good, which is also like kind of another thing with game stories, which also feeds into the cutscene thing again. Like, I feel like game stories themselves, you either have like the generic story, you know, like, oh, we gotta save the world from the aliens and blah blah blah, or you have like the, oh, we're gonna try to do the super edgy and crazy thing, like, which is like, why don't you just try to write a good story? Just like write a good character who maybe just goes through the regular like hero's arc, but does so in a compelling way. Like, if a game like that had cutscenes where like the character just has a diatribe or something like that, I wouldn't mind that, really.
Well, maybe it's just too daunting of a challenge for some people. They feel safer doing something that's like more familiar.
Well, game writing is pretty terrible in general, I feel like.
Well, I think some games just don't really need the story that's just been put in there. Just take the story away.
Yeah.
Like some action games, like, I'd just be fine just give me, like, if you want to put some story in, like, okay, I mean, like, Crysis, the original Crysis.
Yeah.
It's like, the story there, come on.
Aliens on an island killed the aliens, but with a much more words, basically.
There were a few places where it was like, it never really bugged me too much there, but mostly that's because there was a lot of gameplay, and very rarely did the story like shove itself in my face.
Crysis 2 was a lot more like shoving it in your face.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons I didn't like it as much as the original. Is the original Crysis, it just had enough story to like give you purpose as to what you're doing. You know, it's like, okay, you're giving me reasons to go from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you know, it's not a terrible reason, so I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna be overly bothered by it because I can jump onto rooftops and fire my rocket launcher at just a single person because I can. But I think one of the reasons why they want to put like this story into games and also like the cinematics is because marketing. If you have like a story, like whatever story, just like some story, even if it sucks, you can make a trailer about it that seems maybe kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then you can put like the big cutscene explosions and jumps and like, oh my god, this blade just went a millimeter across my eyeball. It almost hit me. Oh god.
Also with game trailers, you can never tell like if this stuff is actually like gameplay, but they just filmed it in like a third-person perspective, like just to give better angles, or if it's just a cutscene.
Unless it's Hitman with the nun scene.
Yeah, I don't.
There was no point to that. That has no purpose within the game. Even it doesn't play any real role within the game.
Well, the Hitman Absolution does have like the nuns in it, like the assassins, the saints, or whatever they were.
But yeah, I believe that mostly it is just for marketing purposes. Because like, you know, it's the easiest way to get yourself out there. You put together a short trailer that people will watch. I mean, it's more reliable than, you know, like putting up articles on some gaming sites like IGN or something.
It's also, I think you can kind of boil the cutscene problem down these days to the fact, like, why do people use cutscenes? It's because it's easier, right? Like, yeah, it's easier to implement in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like trailer material, and it's also the fact that you have something to borrow from when you're making it. You have movies to borrow from, shots and stuff and concepts and so on. So when you're writing the game, you can also just look at movies and stuff and TV shows, and you can just see, oh, I like that concept, I'm gonna implement this into like my story in the game. And there's not a lot of like creativity, which is another problem with like, you know, the games that have cutscenes, the big AAA games. It's just these days there's so little creativity in like AAA development, really. Because mostly like the games we're getting right now, the AAA games, they're using the same mechanics. It's just the mechanics are so refined and they're just so paced so well that it kind of gives you the illusion that this game is like really, you know, good. But then you play it for like a couple of hours, and so like, I don't know, 3-4 hours, and it starts getting stale.
Well,
like,
possibly it is a good game. For instance, if you took a person who hasn't played like any such games before, you give them that game, they'll probably like it. But if you're someone who's played games like that, like over and over and over again, it's like steak is good. How much steak do you really want? Yeah, I think we've pretty much reached the end of our opinions on this currently.
Well, yeah, I think you could probably just talk about this endlessly, but the fact is that, well, we have no control over like what AAA studios do. We can just say our opinions on this matter.
Yeah.
But I like, the only thing we can hope for is just that, just to spark a bit more conversation. Because cutscenes are just so widely accepted as like, yeah, this is how you tell a story. If it has a bunch of cutscenes, it's a story-based game, and it's probably a good story or something like that. Like, it's connections, which is not true. You can have a game that has 0 cutscenes like Bastion and have a great story. And Bastion's storytelling is really interesting in the way that it's not actually borrowing that much from like movies and stuff. The story is kind of like in the background. It's like it's atmospheric in a sense that you experience it through playing the game. Like the narrator talks about like what you're doing and what happened and so on. Like, you don't really have that many cutscenes. They're just like info dumps, like, oh, back in 5,000 years ago, it's ancient demons and, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah. like, and you know, as you said, it's atmospheric. It at no point really takes control away from you to tell that story.
Well, it does in some spots, but it's an actual cutscene. It just cuts away to something.
It's a little less jarring.
Yeah, but I feel like it's not completely hopeless. This thing, like this cutscene, the cutscene problem is a problem with AAA games mainly, and you know, big budget games that have.
Well, because they have the money to make cutscenes, because cutscenes require a lot of time and resources.
Yeah, but actually, we're getting a lot of indie games that don't have stories, but don't have like cutscenes, or just present the story in a different way, which is promising. Which I feel like the big companies should actually look to the smaller ones to, you know, for some inspiration.
I mean, what was that game? Miasmata?
Yeah, the one where you're on the island or in the forest or something.
I don't think there's any like real dialogue or even like in that.
Yeah.
It's basically just there's a bit of text, and you look around and you piece together, you know, what's going on here.
Or like Amnesia.
Yeah.
Imagine if Amnesia had cutscenes. Like, at some points it like switches to a third person and you see your character is like a badass dude with like spiky hair. It's like, I'm gonna have to kill the monster.
It's not even that. It's just like the idea that, you know, at some point control will be taken away from you and things will happen on their own. And you don't have to worry about like keeping yourself alive. That would have actually really taken away from the fear factor.
Yeah. Actually, the games could take inspiration from real life where you have a certain amount of choice, but most of what happens around you is not like your choice, like, oh, this car's gonna drive past. It just drives past, you know, it's something that happens. And that could be like a good point for like to start from when you're making a game. You make up the events that happened, right? The events unfold whether or not like whatever you do. But the way like you can react to those events are just up to the player. Like you don't have to take control away from the player until now you react like this to this. We pretty much covered our thoughts on cutscenes.
At least the main thoughts.
Yeah, probably like
we're not gonna get into too much detail. We're not gonna take every game, you know, like game by game go through them.
Yeah. I'm sure like if you're listening to this, like you have your own ideas of cutscenes and stuff, or like bad examples or good examples of what it could be or not. But you can leave a comment or something like that if you want to.
Yeah, we might respond to those, you know, give our own opinions, because these are just our opinions. Everyone has their own.
Yeah. Actually, I'd really like to hear like what people think about this stuff, because I think about this actually quite a lot. So it would be interesting to hear like if I'm just crazy or something.
If we're just being assholes, cutscenes are fucking amazing. They are God sent.
God damn, I love cutscenes so much. So yeah, I'm Formal Bad.
And I'm Cheesehead.
And you just listened to a bunch of opinions.
Steaks.